Hi, I'm Kriti Shah, and this is my podcast, Have You Thought About? I'm a writer, and I love to find out about what passions people are pursuing, especially if they're managing to blend together their skills in unusual ways. In each edition, I'm chatting with someone I find particularly interesting and who's managed to fit things together in their life or profession that you might not always think of as an obvious match. You're about to hear me chatting with correspondent and presenter Aisha Tull. Now, we've known each other a while, and you've worked in journalism for a pretty long time with pretty much all of the major broadcasters. So, first off, what is it about journalism that keeps you going, that keeps you in what is a pretty volatile industry right now?
It's so difficult. Thank you so much for having me. I think last time we met was at John Schofield and we just gave each other a big, massive hug and then sat down and ate loads of food together. And then everyone came over to us. I loved it. It was brilliant. Speaking about journalism being volatile, it's so difficult out there. I read an article the other day that specifically talked about Black female journalists and them kind of leaving the industry and just how difficult it can be. And it broke my heart because it's an industry that I absolutely love, but it is so tough. We're recording now in the election period. I tell you, I have been to Birmingham, Liverpool, Leeds twice, Manchester, all in the space of about 2 weeks. So it's just so grueling sometimes. It's mental.
So when do you have a breather moment, or do you not? Is it literally just boom, 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 and then at some point you will hope, fingers crossed, that you will have Aisha time?
It's really important to take breaks and stuff because that is really important. At the moment, it's quite difficult because you've got loads of things going on and you kind of realize in these 5 weeks when you've got elections and there's stuff going on and there's stories to chase down, you kind of realize these 5 weeks are going to be crazy. They're just going to be crazy. Everything else kind of takes a back seat. 5th of July, just hoping everything kind of calms down a little bit so that some of us can take a bit of a breather and a break. But breaks are really important. Like this weekend I had off and was just with my best friend. It was my best friend's birthday. We went out to this gig. It was a TikTok gig. I was like, what am I doing here? I'm way too old. But then had a really good time. So yeah, that's really, really important to do as well. So important.
You're one of the few Black British broadcasters visible on screen. Now, our industry is not the most representative of the audiences we serve, so that is actually a lot of responsibility to shoulder. What's your heritage, and also how do you navigate this path?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I was born here, but my parents are from the Caribbean. So my mum is from Guyana, which is next to Brazil, which is part of the Caribbean, but when I want to sound like fancy and stuff, I'm like, it's next to Brazil. It's in South America. Thank you very much. And my dad is from Barbados and they met here. I come from a really working class family. I was on free school meals. My mum was a stay-at-home mum at one point because my brother had special needs. So there were times struggling to make ends meet, going without a lot. I didn't have any of the games and stuff like that or whatever. There was a lot of the hand-me-downs and whatever. But I knew from a really young age that I wanted to be a journalist. I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. I had to do loads of free work experience, but then also work at the same time. I remember I was like working at Marks and Spencer's and then doing like hospital radio in my spare time just to kind of get any sort of experience in this industry. And it's something that I'm really passionate about. And I think without passion, you can't stay in this industry because it can be really, really tough and draining.
The thing is, our industry is not the most representative, whether you're talking about socioeconomic, whether you're talking about people from more underrepresented backgrounds, but you're surviving, or it appears that way. So how are you coping, I guess? Because that can be a lonely space.
You know what? It's not easy. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's been really easy to navigate. I'm one of the most senior Black journalists in our newsroom. And you feel like a responsibility that I feel like no one else feels. So when there are stories about Black women, sometimes you want to put your hand up and say, we have to do it. And then I'm worried that like I'm doing too many sort of quote unquote Black stories and that I'm not going to be taken seriously when doing other stories. You're constantly thinking about it in a way that other colleagues aren't. You know, I've been doing this for a long time, but I remember I was at Newsround. I used to present Newsround in Manchester. And I remember going on like a trip and, you know, they asked at the hotel for the deposit and whatever, and you get the money back for expenses and stuff. But I remember standing there and like handing over some money, and a colleague who was standing next to me, who was a researcher, they went all pale. They looked at me and they were just like, I don't have that much money. And I just looked and I was like, I get you. I've been there. I've been there where I've had like, you know, £5 in my account or whatever. And not many people get that. And I was so glad that they were able to tell me in that moment that, look, I don't have the £200 to put on my card as a deposit to even claim back. Like, there's just so many things that people don't think about, even like subscriptions for papers, buying newspapers every week. It's really expensive. People just assume that you should have all of this stuff and that you should just pay for it out of your own pocket and it's fine. And it's not. I've been in the industry for a while, so I've learned how to be vocal for myself, but I know that it's really difficult for junior people to say, hey, I don't have a Times subscription. Or, hey, I don't have a New York Times one or Washington Post or whatever. And like a Financial Times one, there are so many.
Even as a freelancer, even if you have got experience, because there have been so many layoffs, there have been so many sort of redundancies where people who perhaps were going up the social mobility ladder are now tumbling back down through no fault of their own. It's just the way that the industry is. So I'm glad that you say that, because I think it's really important to have these conversations. And that brings me on to the fact that for you, authenticity is really, really important, like being the same on screen, having that persona, but with gravitas, and also being true to who you are and how you got to where you are as well. But factoring that in, again, that also means having to have a degree of vulnerability, right? So how do you manage that?
I think it's taken me a really long while to realize that the only person that you can be is yourself. One of the worst bits of advice I got was kind of back in the day. Someone said, you know, when you're doing the news, you don't sound like you're authoritative, like put on a voice and whatever. And I think that lasted for about 2 days. And then I realized, no, because I kept tripping up. I kept tripping up over my words. And I was like, what is going on? This isn't me. And that was why. It was because I was just putting on this act. And then I realized that that's just not the way to go. I will mention Newsround like several times. Like you should have like a Newsround bingo.
Just in case. So with Newsround, for any international listeners, because we do have international listeners, it's a children's television program. It's been around for many, many years.
I went to the 50th anniversary party. That was fun.
It's absolutely groundbreaking and has definitely helped children all over in terms of understanding the news. It's not patronizing. It's a brilliant program to look out for. So Aisha has come from a brilliant pedigree, to be perfectly frank with you. So continues, but just in case.
That's very kind. No, just in case no one knows what that is. But it helped me because when you have to speak to kids who are 6 to 12 years old, you can't help but be yourself. You can't help but put yourself into things. And I feel like when people go to kind of, I used to call it adult news for the longest time, which sounds really seedy, but it's not. But when you go into some of these bigger kind of newsrooms like BBC and ITV and Channel 4, Channel 5, because I've had like such a grounding in children's news, I was always myself. I've always been myself, and then I project that onto anything that I do. And I feel like sometimes when you go into like these kind of bigger spaces that you haven't had that kind of training ground, it definitely helped me. I was a shy kid. Actually, I think like my natural state is to be an introvert, which no one agrees with when I say this. Everyone's like, no, you're not. You're really extroverted. You're really this, you're that. But I learned that if you don't kind of project some sort of something, that people will just kind of walk over you and won't listen to you. So I learned how to do it and felt much better doing it. And I also think that, you know, going back to authenticity and being myself, it's really important for me to be that representation for others. I had Charlene White, I had Trevor McDonald, I had Moira Stewart to look up to. And I hope this doesn't sound too egotistical, but I know that I'm representation for others that are coming up. And if I'm not being myself and if I'm being someone else and I'm not being genuine, I think you kind of see through that really quickly. One of the best compliments I had was from my wedding coordinator when I got married in 2022. And she met me for the first time at my wedding venue, like a couple of months before we got married. And she said, "You're exactly like you are on TV." And I was like, yes, thank you.
Something else that's really important with you, your family is really, really important. What do they make of all of this?
I think they're proud. My dad, he never really says that he is proud, but then tells everyone else he's proud. And I'm like, oh, okay, fair enough. I think that's just, Caribbean dad's prerogative. To not get, so that I don't get a big head. It's like, oh, well, make sure that she keeps grounded. I'm not going to tell her, but I'll tell all my mates.
But I think that's exactly what our dads are like. But it's brilliant that your dad,
And my mum, she's so supportive. She's just always just there kind of lifting me up whenever I feel down. She's just amazing. And I think she still buys me Sunday papers every weekend so that I can read and catch up with everything. So she'll go out and get the papers for me, which is really cute. And now I have my husband, who is also really, really supportive and just there whenever I'm having crazy mental days. But one person that is sadly not with us anymore, who was also a support, was my brother. And he died in 2021. He was only 36. And so it was such a big rent. It was horrible. So without him, things are hard, but he also had so much joy and laughter and was just this amazing person that what I do now, I'm kind of doing for him. I want to make him proud of what I'm doing.
With your brother, and he does sound absolutely amazing, that grief, that his legacy and your legacy, how does that help, not just within your journalism, but in life generally?
I think once you lose something so precious to you, it changes you. It changes you. I think that I'm just a different person. I'm completely different. I listen more. I listen more to people. I want to make sure. Rob had autism, and so stories with special educational needs are very dear to my heart. And so I kind of take up these stories and I make sure that I do them to the best of my ability. And I listen to people and I kind of go in knowing the background of all that. So my parents were struggling to get him diagnosed. He was kicked out of his special needs school. He was excluded from his primary special needs school. They just went through so much and they were fighting every step of the way. I kind of don't tell people that that's what I went through, but when I'm listening to them, I can relate. And then when I am in the edit suite, kind of scripting and stories, I have all of that knowledge. And I think that really helps. And that for me is the best legacy that I could have, or that Rob could have, is just that everything that he went through wasn't in vain. So yeah, I want to make sure that that's what I do.
I think that's absolutely beautiful. And I was diagnosed as autistic in December. Very late diagnosis, and it's not easy finding people from basically experiences that I find are often white, and it's really hard to understand what role culture plays in it, where you can get support. To hear this from you, and thank you for sharing. It really makes me even more amazed by the person that you are and how your family has brought you to where you are as well, including Rob, including your parents. It's absolutely brilliant because it's not easy. It's really hard trying to navigate this path, and the fact that your family's done it for so long and you're continuing Rob's legacy, it's honestly absolutely wonderful to hear that.
Thank you.
With that empathy though, one thing again I think is quite important. When do you find time for you? Like, what do you do that helps you have a little bit of respite and helps you maintain your own identity as Aisha?
It's really hard. Just thinking, when do I find time? When I do find time though, it's just with my friends. And it's really funny because I think it's actually really important to just step out of the news bubble and go and speak to people. And then I'm saying all this stuff and they're like, wait, what happened? I don't even watch the news. I hate when my friends say that. I'm like, what are you doing to me? I don't even watch the news. I don't even have a telly. I'm like, shut up. You are so horrible. They bring me back down to life in such a humbling way. It's amazing. But I think they really kind of help me in those moments of kind of like stress and anxiety and all that sort of stuff. They're just like, it's only telly and, I didn't watch. So what difference does it make? So that actually really helps me. And I think that's the main thing. And music and festivals. I love festivals. I love going to any sort of festival. I went to a Girls Aloud concert recently and sung my heart out with my friends. And it was just such a joyous thing. And I think that's how I find my downtime, is just spending loads of time with them wherever I can. And sometimes I feel really bad because I can be a really flaky friend when stuff comes up. But I'm just like, I can even be a flaky wife when I told this story when I got married. The Queen had passed away a couple of weeks before I got married, like about a week or two before I got married. And I was sent to Jamaica to do the Commonwealth response. And I would be back like a couple of days before the wedding. And I remember just going up to my husband and saying, okay, I've got good news and bad news. The good news, I'm going to Jamaica. The bad news, I'm going now. And his face was just so crestfallen. And he said, are you going to make it back? I said, yeah, I'll be fine. It'll be fine. I made it back. It was fine. But that's kind of what I quite like, the chaotic energy of journalism life. I love that. I'm just like, it's mental and I quite like it.
But your husband's
not for everyone.
I was going to say, your husband's not in journalism, right? Like he's
no,
in a different industry.
No, the two of us could not. No. He's very like 9 to 5, very much structure, likes being home, like with our dog, and is very much a homebody. Whereas I'm like, okay, bye, see you.
But this is the thing: you are doing some amazing work. You are bringing some amazing original stories. Your journalism cannot be, but I'm not going to criticize it. It's sound, but. One thing that also makes you is that I think all journalists are a little bit weird. I just think that's the way that we are in order to be able to identify and also look for the subversive. Now, for you though, humour. Tell us more about I'm not going to say comedy aspirations, but your humour, your humour world.
Funny. Do you know what? I think humour diffuses a lot of situations. As journalists, sometimes you'll go into positions and places where people just don't want you to be there, right? And so that can be quite difficult. And I went into this wonderful choir in Harrow, and they were having this rehearsal. And then it's just me, my cameraman Devron, my producer Amelia, and we kind of rock up and we're just here at this rehearsal. And not that they didn't want us to be there, but they're just kind of like, who the hell are you? And I kind of just walked in and was just like, hi, so we're from Channel 4 News. This is what we're doing. We're talking about the election. We're asking, are politicians hitting the right notes? Because it was a choir. Terrible joke. Did not go down well. But they laughed anyway. Boom. And, it automatically put people at ease. I could hear people in the room going, because I think we turn up with a camera or you turn up with a notepad or whatever, and it puts people's backs up sometimes. And so what you have to do is know how to diffuse the situation, know how to make people laugh, and just say, actually, this is really weird. We're coming here with a camera and we're sticking it in your face and we're asking you to pretend that the camera isn't there. That's weird. And like, let's just call it out for what it is. It is odd. It is very strange. And even when we have to do, you've done them before, like reverses. So you only have one camera, but you have to get like the other angle. So you have to kind of stand there and you have to put the camera on the other side as well and do the same questions that you've done before. I hope I've explained that all right. Hopefully I have. And it's just really weird because you're asking the same questions again and people are like, you just asked that question. And I'm like, but we don't have two cameras. And it's just, the whole thing is weird. The whole thing that we do is weird and it's really odd. And you just have to just explain it's really weird and whatever. And it's funny. And your mates might laugh in the pub seeing you on telly saying some things. Isn't that funny? Sometimes humour doesn't work. Sometimes it really doesn't. 9 times out of 10, it works. And I think it's really important just not to take yourself too seriously because at the end of the day, it's only telly.
This is true. But going back to something you said earlier, that you're introverted, is this something you had to learn? Are these like mechanisms that you've basically taught yourself or observed others and thought, okay, I'm nicking that, I'm borrowing that, I'm using that? And the reason I say that is I actually went to go and do improv classes because I thought that would help me be a much better public speaker. So when I have a moment of freezing, now it's less scary because I'm like, no, I can improv. It's fine. So with you, with these techniques, with the humour, is that something you basically taught yourself as you got more experience?
I think it's definitely something that I've taught myself, is just being able to kind of speak in that moment and do things. And improv is I'd love to do an improv class. That would be so much fun. I watch a lot of RuPaul's Drag Race and they do improv in loads of different things. And I always just think it's absolutely amazing. So I think that's a really good tip. One of the things that I kind of realized early in my career was that I sat in lots of meetings and I kept really quiet. I didn't say anything. And then I realized people were saying the ideas that I had. And I thought, actually, how much better is it that I just come up with these ideas and that I say them and I articulate them. And when I started doing that, it was so much easier. And like bosses recognized that I actually had all these ideas and I wasn't just silent. And it also helped me stick up for myself a lot more. I think when you're introverted, sometimes people kind of speak for you. And I've always been the person, no, I'm going to speak for myself. I'm going to advocate for myself. I work as a mentor for the John Schofield Trust. And one of the things that I'm kind of talking to my mentee about is confidence and being able to articulate your own ideas. There's one tip that someone gave me once because I was really struggling with meetings and I hated them. I'm still not a fan of them. I don't, I'm my natural instinct is to just be quiet, but someone said, like, say something really early on, even if it's like just agreeing or yes, or something, just say something really early on. It takes the pressure off. Helped me out so much because I just think, oh, I've said something once, I can just say it again. It's fine. Because in Channel 4 News, we have like these big beasts of journalism. We've got Christian Guru Murthy, Matt Fry, Kathy Newman, Jackie Long. And then there's little old me. And I always think, oh God, anything I say is going to sound really stupid. But I say it anyway, so I'm like, whatever.
I've been in situations, not always newsrooms actually, I've been in situations where you've had professors, you've had academics, people that are very, very cerebral. And maybe it's the journalism in that, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Like, I actually think it's better to ask it and deal with it. And so I'll be like, I just want to understand this. And then afterwards, they'll come up to me after and say, I'm so glad you asked that because I didn't know either. And I was like, but you're so much cleverer than me. Like, I don't understand why. I'm like, fine, I'll be the stupid one. If it makes me sound stupid, it's fine. But I would rather understand what it is that we're doing. And I think in a lot of spaces, people, they're too scared to ask. And I think it's really important.
They are too scared. I think there's a lot of assumed knowledge as well, yes. Right? So much assumed knowledge. People assume like you, and especially working in news, we're just assuming that people are watching every single bulletin and they know every single thing and they know all of the kind of terms and phrases, all of that fiscal drag. Like I always have to get Helia Ebrahimi, who's our economics correspondent, just to be like, I'm sorry, what is this again? Just explain to me. I don't mind looking a little bit silly or a little bit simple. I really don't. I don't care. Because I think that there are people out there that are asking that question. And actually, it's more silly just to use terms and not explain it. It's like my cardinal sin. I hate when people do that because I'm just like, you're not bringing people with you. That's the whole point of journalism or whatever, communicating. You've got to bring people with you. Throughout the whole of COVID, for example, there was all these sciencey terms. And I remember just like being like, we have to kind of debunk what the R rate is, which is like the reproduction rate, which meant that if you had like R rate of 1, that was how much the virus was spreading by. If it was by 2, it was by double. And I would always explain these statistics because we started to use them and then just assume that everyone knew what the R rate was. And I hate that. It's one of my pet peeves about journalism sometimes is we do that, and I try not to.
Because we do need to demystify terms, and I'm so glad that as a journalist, as a human, as an Aisha, that's what you're doing. Absolutely amazing. Is there anything else that people don't know about you? Like, you're talking about singing earlier. Are you a belter? Can you actually sing? Is that your like special skill? Are you an opera singer? Are we going to see you on like The Voice?
Oh my gosh, no, like the Masked Singer. No, you will not. You will absolutely not. I like to sing. I don't think I'm actually that good. I think I'm delusionally good. So in my head, I can sing in a concert when everyone else is singing and think I sound amazing, but probably I'm really not. Do you know what I absolutely love is cooking? Absolute. Like, if anyone wants to put me on MasterChef, then please do, because I absolutely love cooking. And it's something that like helps me unwind, helps me feel better. Like loads of Caribbean food as well. I I absolutely love it. My husband actually doesn't cook much because since he's met me, I'm the one that cooks.
And that was Aisha Tull, correspondent and presenter. Do you have an interdisciplinary life? Because I would love to hear from you, and maybe we can chat on this podcast that goes with my newsletter, which is called Have You Thought About, and can be found via www.druthishah.com. Please join me next time for a fun conversation with another guest who likes to mix up lots of things in their life. Do listen to past episodes and rate and review it if you've enjoyed it. Thank you to Reen Shah for the music.